You are listening to the Not Another Sports podcast. Here are your hosts, David and Jason.
Welcome to the Not Another Sports podcast, episode 11. This is the home of sports talk for everyone. I'm David.
I'm Jason. And joining us tonight is our special guest, pro wrestling referee extraordinaire and all-around great guy, Matt Deurelein from The A Show and By the Numbers on CKCC Radio. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
You just did.
Well, I didn't give us some background.
Here you go, Jason, overachiever.
God, it's so late at night, Jason. I'm barely awake. Yes, as Jason has said, my name is Matt. I am a pro wrestling referee on the independent wrestling circuit in my 17th year, though it's been severely hindered by the Rona. I haven't worked a show since Leap Day of last year. I predominantly these days work for True Wrestling out of Northeast Pennsylvania, as well as Excite Wrestling out of Binghamton, New York. I'm also affiliated with independentwrestling.tv, or Jerry's Internet Wrestling Emporium, as we call it. And I've also worked shows in the past for Chikara, for WXWC4. I'm technically still with Dropkick Depression, only because I started working for them, and then the pandemic hit, and I was booked to go back, and then, again, the Rona happened. Dropkick Depression's out of New Jersey. I have worked in many states. I went to Canada once upon a time. All sorts of good stuff. So thank you guys for having me. I met Jason. He was a fan at one of the worst indies I've ever worked for. That shall remain nameless, out of Shittown, Pennsylvania.
I have to be a little specific on what town that actually is, because there's plenty of that.
Yes, all of the above. Let's just say I unfortunately spent a lot of my formative years in the business in the coal region, and it was not the best plan, but I was also working in much more high-profile places at the same time, so I guess it evened out. But Jason was a fan who eventually got into the business with us. He did some ring announcing, he did some managing, he did some play-by-play or color. So Jason's also a wrestling guy as well. We're going to talk about some wrestling in the third period tonight. So please don't shut us off if you're not a wrestling fan. Please keep listening. And I do host, it's called By the Numbers, where I have every match I've ever reffed written down in a notebook. And I bring guys on and, interview them about the matches of theirs that I have reffed and the stories behind them. Last week, a new episode dropped with the Diamond City War Machines. It was part 1 because it was a 4-hour Skype call. So next Monday will be part 2 of the Diamond City War Machines interview. And then also, because this will come out on Monday, correct?
Sunday night.
Okay, so you're probably hearing this on Monday if it came out Sunday night. So Monday, the 11th, will be a new episode of The A Show. It's myself and Chris Decker. What we do is we pick a year, and we pick a wrestling promotion, and then we hold the draft. And every episode we have a guest. This week on The A Show, we do have our friend DJ, a.k.a. The Dooge. He is from the Wednesday Night War podcast on the soon-to-be-named network. And we are doing 1992 WCW. So nice. Make sure to check that out. We recorded that the other night. It was a lot of fun. So I will not take up too much more time here, because I know there's time restraints and all sorts of things. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself there.
Oh, thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thank you.
I'm excited to be here.
So on that note, let's go into period 1 here. Hockey starts on the 13th of January with a 56-game season. Now, as a hockey fan myself, I'm giddy as a schoolgirl here. I'm so excited that hockey's back and or coming back. I'm just pumped for it.
I will say it's been quite a couple weeks here as a Boston Bruins fan. Despite living in Pittston, Pennsylvania, I am a Boston Bruins fan. I went to the Boston Garden once, and I grew up a Rangers fan. And really, it just overtook that Rangers fandom. Like, And the experience of the Boston Garden is something that even as an away fan, you need to see sometime. That said, I think the team made the right call by standing their ground with Chara and letting him go to Washington because he is 43 years old or 44 years old or 86 years old or however old he is at this point. And it is his time to start to be the second or third pair. And I saw a lot of complaints online about how, it only took $790,000 to sign Chara. Well, when he's playing 23 minutes a game for you in Washington and his knees fall apart and turn to dust, you're going to be very upset with that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how with the Chara, like what your reaction, what your thing was, but we just got there. I was a bit shocked to begin with because Chara's been there for ages. Now, yes, he is a giant. The man is almost 7 foot tall on skates.
Yeah.
So when you hit him, it's like hitting a tree, basically. I mean, he is a hell of a defenseman. But I was curious on like what your thoughts was with him going to Washington because that was a surprising move. But also,
it was.
But when
sorry. Go ahead.
But when I was reading, it said that Boston wanted to take him into a smaller role.
Yeah, and it's time. If you've watched the Bruins at all over the past couple of years, and I do pretty regularly, and I have a comment on that momentarily as well that I spoke with Jason about the other day about NHL TV that I kind of did a 180 on. I wound up paying for anyway.
Gee, sounds like something I would do.
If you watched him play the past couple of years, you saw that he's in his 40s, and he's not moving the way he used to, and he's not really a top pair defenseman anymore. And they do have some youth in the lineup now. They have Charlie McAvoy, who's really coming to his own the past year or two. But then I personally feel like there's a pretty steep drop-off after McAvoy, and you get to like your Kevin Millers of the world and your Brandon Carlos, and Brandon Carlo is decent, but he's not a top pair guy. And then they didn't sign Torrey Krug back either for reasons that I'll never understand. But I think he wanted more money than they wanted to give him. And, excuse me. So I think they're going to be in a tough spot this year without Chara and his leadership on that second or third pair. But Chara thinks he's above the second or third pair. So it clearly was not going to work out.
I mean, to me, Chara is one of those defensemen where he is. I mean, I know personally I consider him an elite defenseman. Yes, I'm not a big Boston fan. I'm a big Flyers fan. But in general, and Jason, you can contest this, I'm a big hockey fan. I mean, how many times have we stayed up till what knows who on the center ice?
Yeah, we've had a lot of late Fridays and Saturday nights watching hockey at your parents' house in our younger
Saturday
days.
Nights. Yes, younger days. That's about it. Yeah, because we would stay up till those when watching whatever team. We'd have ESPN on for box scores to see who's the game's closest, who's going to overtime, and we would switch to that game.
We always tried to catch the National Hockey Night game too.
Yes, at 7 o'clock, and I think it was at 7 and at 10 o'clock on the Canadian stations.
Yes,
but I was really shocked though with that trade, like I said before. But yeah, Chara. I mean, like I said, he to me he is an elite defenseman, but like you said, younger defensemen coming into the organization. How is that pairing with an older defenseman that is, like you said, his knees could turn to dust at any moment?
And I think it's fine to have that pairing, but it can't be the top pairing. It can't be 20-plus minutes a game. I think Chara's leadership on the team would have been a big boost. Excuse me. Now, I don't have any delusions that the Bruins are a Stanley Cup contender this year. I think that there's going to be some drop-off. I think there's going to be some questions in goal because I haven't heard anything about whether or not Rask is coming back. And Halak is good, Yaroslav Halak, but I don't know if he is an everyday, kind of goalie. And if he's not, who is playing in Providence now? So I don't foresee them as a Stanley Cup contender, but I also think that Chara would have helped with those younger guys coming up from Providence that would have really given them that boost and gotten them into NHL level play. A friend of mine played in his younger days for Wilkes University. So he was very well versed in the whole how hockey works. I know you are as well. Even when you get called up from the AHL, it's still 2 to 3 years before you are a full-fledged NHL defenseman. Like, you need, the speed of the game is different, and just the level of play is so much different from the AHL. So having Chara there would have helped with that, and I kind of wish that he had said, okay, I'll go on the second or third line, or the second or third pair, and we'll make this work, and we'll get the youth ready.
Yeah, I don't think it comes to him being that he's been in the NHL so long, he's been at that top pairing. If he wants to sit back, because, like every player who's getting to be that time, hey, I'm a top defenseman, I need to be at number one. Now, I know sometimes coming, like you were saying, with coming from up the AHL to the NHL, it does take time. But yeah, I don't see, like I said, maybe Char could be a second line role at the max.
I'd say so. That said, I don't want to completely dominate your Pennsylvania-based podcast with Boston Bruins talk. I know that you're a big Flyers fan, and they had a pretty good resurgence there at the end of this, going into the bubble, a.k.a. Gary Bettman's only good act ever, as we saw this week when they decided to sponsor the divisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think Flyers are a contender, not just because, well, it's my team, I want to say they are, but I think they have a good chance to play for, to be a good contender. I mean, as long as Hart stays healthy and the rest of the team starts going, I mean, as long as they can as long as they cannot fall into the funk of what the Flyers have done at the beginning of the season, of the NHL season, which is not score goals. Because they had the defense, they had the goaltending between Elliott and Hart, but they couldn't do anything in goals. They'd go like you'd see like their fourth line gets goals instead of their like the Drew, the Voraceks. They never produced them. I should say normally, like you would expect them to. When you look at the box scores, you expect to see their names.
Yes,
and all you saw were the fourth line, players. And like I said, the defensemen were holding. I mean, I think when they got rid of Simmons, I still wish they could have kept him. I still wish they could have kept Simmons just because of what he brought to the team.
Absolutely. He even just his presence on the ice makes a difference.
Absolutely it did. I mean, him in front of the net taking a beating, but him taking a beating, he got how many goals for taking that beating?
Exactly. And that's the kind of production that you don't really see around the league much anymore, because it's a faster, less physical game these days, which I'm not knocking, because especially coming from a pro wrestling perspective, concussions are bad and head injuries are very bad, and you want to steer away from that. But he was that kind of player that had that grit and would take that beating to produce, and you don't see much of that in the league anymore.
Well, you don't see that in the league ever since the end of the 2004 season after the lockout. Yeah. You don't see it after that. Before that, you saw the two different styles. The European style, which is more finesse, which you mainly saw in the West, and you had your more North American style, which was the brute in the East. Like the Devils, the Flyers, the Bruins had it, the Rangers had it, where it was more of a physical aspect, where, like I said, the West was more of a finesse because it mainly had your European style players.
True.
Now for some players, it East or West, it played to their strengths, but nowadays you don't see any of the hard hitting that you saw before.
And again, not necessarily a bad thing, but it is part of the game. It's not ballet. It's ice hockey. It's a bunch of grown men getting angry over a piece of rubber, and a whole lot of "oops, I couldn't stop," and now you're checked into the boards. Like, And I do appreciate the faster paced game of today. I mean, there's some people that are so mind-bogglingly good at it, like your Crosbys and your Ovechkins, that you just want to scream at them. Partially because they're not on your team, and partially because it's just insane to watch some of the things that the players can do today that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. But there is I still have a soft spot for that more rugged style, that more hard-hitting style in moderation and without concussions.
Yeah, well, because here's the thing with concussions. A lot of people think that hockey's concussions are mainly of fighting, which it's not.
Nope.
And some people think that it is. Now, I forget what episode this was. We did for hockey shows or documentaries, movies, and we did we mentioned Ice Guardians, which is on Netflix. It's a great documentary to watch. That they said it's mainly from the hits, the sudden stops, not fighting. And I agree with that 100% because I know over the years, I don't know how many concussions I've suffered from playing, from, just getting hit and getting pucks to the head for starters.
And a big part of that is a lot of times you can't even see it coming. Like your head's just got to be on a swivel. Mm-hmm. And this is someone who's never played, like I played roller hockey when I was in middle school and high school with my friends, but I was never played ice hockey before, but I know that you got to have your head on a swivel at all times, and you just got to be ready to get hit at any moment, even if you don't see it coming. And that's a big part of it too, because you don't have time to prepare for the hit.
No, you don't. No, you don't. That's one of the things that you got, like you said, you got to have it here on a swivel. Now, you're a Bruins fan, I'm a Flyers fan. What do you think of the Lake Tahoe game coming up?
I think it's hilarious. So they're
I'm hoping it happens.
Darts. They're throwing darts at a dartboard. Like, where can we put this game of two teams that are on the East Coast? I don't know, Nevada. Let's do it there. I hope it starts at an East Coast time and not a West Coast time, because as we discussed off air, I'm old, being almost 40, and have a very active, at that point, 7-year-old she'll be. So I don't foresee myself watching any late games if there were any this year, which let's talk about that for a second if we can. So they've realigned everything for the COVID year. And I was talking to Jason the other day about this, and Jason actually kind of helped put things in perspective and kind of talked me off the ledge a little bit. I had already canceled it, but I've reactivated. So for the single team package, it is $85 for NHL TV. And it's 56 games. With the realignment, here in Northeast Pennsylvania, the Rangers, the Penguins, and the Flyers are all blacked out. And now they're all in division. So that's 18 games that I was losing right off the bat. And I was like, that's not cool. That's not really worth my time financially. So I made a decision. I talked to my wife. I was like, hey, we're getting a lot less games than I thought. She goes, well, that's stupid. I said, yeah, I'm just canceling it. So I shut it off. And then I'm talking to Jason. He's like, that's only $2.25 a game, right?
Way to go, Jason. Are you secretly working for the NHL right now?
No, I'm just a nerd.
He's like, I have to do math. It's something I have to do. I'm so sorry. But blackouts are so dumb.
I agree.
And I had this conversation because we have a little hockey text going with some friends, and I let them know, like, hey, I bailed on NHL TV because the price seemed kind of steep for what I'm really getting for it. And my friend Irish Kev lives in the Lehigh Valley, where he's also a Bruins fan, but only the Flyers are blacked out there. So he would only lose 6 games instead of where I would lose 18 because of how the blackouts work. Oh. But we were having a conversation. It's crazy to think that, like, in Iowa, there are 6 baseball teams that are blacked out.
Interesting.
Also, if you live in Guam, the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants are blacked out. Just a 20-hour flight to get to a game if you wanted to
go. Okay. Interesting.
But blackouts are really terrible. That said, the Flyers would not be blacked out. So to bring it back around, I would be able to watch that Lake Tahoe game regardless. And it's funny that it's in Lake Tahoe and not someplace in the Northeast where it's actually cold and you can play outside for real.
Well, I know me and Jason have talked about this, that we wish they would hold a game, whether it be Winter Classic or just an outdoor game, at Beaver Stadium in State College. That would be something that I know I would love to go see. I would love to. I mean, I've been to the outdoor game at Citizen Bank Park. I was at the outdoor game where it was held in Hershey, and just being at them is just a great nostalgia to be at. Now, what's funny is though, when me and Jason went to a Phillies game the one time, the last time I was at a Phillies game at Citizen Bank Park was to watch a hockey game. Yeah, I know. Just saying that just kind of sounds weird, but it was true. The last time I was at Citizen Bank Park to watch a hockey game. Which, why would you go to a baseball stadium to watch a hockey game? Well,
the first time I was ever in Fenway Park, my wife and I were actually in Boston. Funny enough, on our honeymoon, that's where we decided to go. We went to go see the Mighty Mighty Bosstones at Hometown Throwdown. Nice. And when we toured Fenway Park, the rink was set up for the Frozen Four. Or Frozen Fenway, excuse me. So like Boston University, Boston College, Northeastern, Maine, New Hampshire. They had like the big tournament in Fenway Park. And we're touring Fenway and we're on the Green Monster. I'm like, there's a hockey rink down there on the baseball stadium. That's cool.
But yeah, going to those outdoor games are fun. They are exciting. Now, what do you guys think of the sponsor divisions now?
So since this is something we talked about a few episodes ago, as far as the NHL's financial issues, because it is compared to MLB, NFL, and NBA, who are rights driven with their income, the NHL is very much ticket driven. This is clearly a move on their part to bring in some more money to the league, so they don't take as much of a financial hit this coming season. That's it. I don't agree with it, but I understand why.
Well, the what was it? I think the ECHL does it, and all the European leagues do it. Sponsorships all over the ice. I mean, the face-off circles have sponsorships in them. So, I mean, it's really nothing new to hockey, but it'll be something new to the more broad audience of hockey lovers. Now, like I said, the ECHL has it, I believe. Seeing it in the AHL and the NHL is going to be different to see.
I feel like as someone who is a fan of the New York Red Bulls in MLS, I can't really complain too much about sponsorships being anywhere, seeing as how an energy drink owns the soccer team I like. But at the same time, it is going to be weird. And I've been to ECHL games in the past because my brother lives in Corning, New York, and they had a team in Elmira. So when we go up and visit them for the weekend, we go to Elmira Jackals games. But I don't remember offhand if they had – this is so long ago now. I don't remember if they had anything on the ice at that point. Here in Wilkes-Barre, there were a lot more ads on the ice last year. I only got to one game because the Penguins have gotten stupid expensive to go to for an AHL game. But the one game we did go to, there were more sponsors on the ice. And I think they did have a sponsor. I don't think they've had sponsors on their jerseys for a while now in Wilkes-Barre. So, but they haven't had they've not had sponsored divisions. And I get that they need money because there's no fans. But at the same time, they could do what they're doing, for example, in the Premier League, where they are getting, and I think to an extent in the NFL as well, where they're over the seats putting the banners, like selling banner space that goes over the chairs. And you could sell a banner to a company for the same price as what those tickets are going to be and still make all that revenue back. So I feel like the NHL should really be exploring that too, because those seats, whether there's people in them or not, are going to still show up on camera. So you can still sell ad space.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, now looking enough for, if we want to see a cheap game, we just go, I know the Reading Royals are, what, Jason, maybe an hour from us?
About an hour, yeah.
Yeah, give or take. And I mean, I went to a few ECHL games with them a few times, and even they were fun just to go to.
I met the Reading Royals mascot once. There was a wrestling show was on at the Hamburg Fieldhouse, and he was there. And Irish Kevin and I and AJ Evers got our picture taken, which apparently exists somewhere. I don't remember this. It's like 10 years ago now. We got our picture taken with the Reading Royals mascot in the Hamburg Fieldhouse.
Nice. Well, let's just hope hockey season definitely stays true, because I know I just read that Dallas already has COVID cases. So fun times. I think it's 6 players and 2 personnel. So got to love that already, even before the season started. Now, I know, Jason, we don't want to beat the dead horse or try to revive it or do the Godfather thing again here. But we're just going to let it at that. So that's the end of period 1. So now if I could get my horn to work, that'd be fantastic. There it goes. Yeah, that's about it. Gotta love it. So on to period 2. MLB offseason moves.
I think we got to start with this one more so because it's timely, not just because Matt is a Mets fan. How do you feel about
Boston and a Mets fan? Come on.
How do you feel about the trade?
The trade is a good thing, obviously, and I'm very excited that the Mets have ownership that wants to actually do good things. It's kind of sad to see Ahmed Rosario go, because I feel like he had a lot of potential, but potential is not now. That said, being the Mets fan that I am, I fully expect an 80-82 season, 11 games out of first, and and missing the wild card by 3.
So you expect them to Met the bed?
Yeah, every year. I mean, they still have to pay Bobby Bonilla. But all kidding aside, I never want to say I'm optimistic about a Mets season, because that's the last thing you ever want to do as a Mets fan, is say, I'm optimistic for this year, because a lot of people were optimistic for last year. And then look what happened. They were the shits. So
as a Phillies fan, I understand.
I was going to say, isn't that like it's typical, well, not just Phillies, but isn't that typical Philadelphia fan in general, where you're hoping for Phillies or Flyers a good season, and it's like, well, okay, disappointment.
I think that's just a diehard fan mentality in general. I don't think that's a city-specific mentality.
It could be a Philadelphia-specific mentality in some ways. You guys are bred a little bit differently as Philadelphia fans.
To expect pain and suffering?
And then throw batteries at Santa. It's all the...
Oh, here we go.
Here
we go.
One. It was not Phillies fans. It was Eagles fans. 2, this happened in the 60s. It has not happened since.
As someone...
3, Santa Claus was antagonizing the fans.
Yeah, you never want to antagonize. Fans. I've been to a game to where this person had a cowbell and was ringing it during a game, and she was for the opposing team. This was in Philly during a Flyers game.
Oh,
my brother looked at exactly. Brother looked
Why?
at each other exactly, and she got ripped. I mean, the fans don't get me. They were, the fans were drunk. Go figure. But she got ripped. And me and Matt were like, we're going to get kicked out. We're going to get thrown out of this. We're not saying anything. We're not doing anything, but we're like, yeah, this is not going to be good.
Guilty by association. Now,
welcome to Philly.
As someone who has experienced it from the other side, reffing matches in the ECW arena, I feel like I can say a little bit more because I've been the target of some of it in the past. Because Philadelphia wrestling fans may be worse than Philadelphia football fans or Philadelphia hockey fans. So, but
That's
that
hard
said,
to believe.
I don't know. Go to a wrestling show in Philadelphia sometime. I know you're a big fan. Jason's telling me. You even have two people to talk about in the third period. So, like, I know you're a giant wrestling fan. But that said, I'm cautiously optimistic for the Mets season. We'll see. We'll see.
So, with that said about the Mets, the Cubs are clearly having a fire sale. They've given up, and they are going to a rebuild. And this kind of ties in with the Padres win now mode. They got rid of Darvish. The Padres picked up Darvish from the Cubs. That to me is a clear sign the Cubs are they're starting over.
I think you're going to see a lot of teams in that sell mode while there's no fans. To be perfectly honest.
That makes a lot of sense. While MLB isn't ticket driven as far as revenue is concerned, that's still revenue lost.
It is.
So I get that idea, and the rumor's even been floated that the Phils are thinking of putting Wheeler on the chopping block just because of his contract.
Wait. Time out.
You didn't hear that like a month ago?
No, I don't get to see much in the way of anything that's not dumb videos on YouTube that my daughter likes to watch where people play video games, and she watches them play video games.
I understand that.
The Zach Wheeler that they literally just signed.
Owner John Middleton shot it down, but the rumor came out that supposedly people in the front office were floating it out to other teams. But this was before they hired Dombrowski. This is before they hired their new GM, so I'm fairly certain it was much ado about nothing.
Like, people in the front office, like who? Like a secretary or something? Like going rogue and calling the Oakland A's like, "Hey, we got Zach Wheeler for sale."
It's just it's just
I'm going based
all.
on the Athletics report. That's all I have.
But the Athletics report of some
I clearly have a lot of inside sources.
Well, it's just somebody sitting there typing out, "We got somebody for sale," and then sending it out by an email.
The fanatic is there with Morse code.
Oh, there you go.
Doing SOS.
A whiteboard.
Yeah.
I think outside of the Cubs having their fire sale, I think you're right with the sentiment that it's going to be revenue driven why people are going to be unloading players. The Padres are clearly all in with picking up Snell from the Rays, who I think the Rays hosed with him in the World Series, and then picking up Darvish. They're trying to win a World Series.
Well, then again, what team is not trying to win a World Series? Every team's looking to do that, but like you said with the Padres, when you got somebody who is going to be picking up all these players just to,
I think they're trying to build around Fernando Tatis Jr. clearly, and they want to win a World Series with him in his prime, and he's the man right now for the Padres.
I'm going to counterpoint and say, yes, every team's desire is to win the World Series, but I think that there are teams that realistically know that they are not going to win the World Series.
The Phillies.
So they are not as all in as the Padres are, per se. I think that rebuild mentality does, like, you hear about it all the time, but like, it's a real thing. Like, teams know that they're 5 years out, 3 years out. Like, they know their farm system, and they know we just got to get through these couple seasons with the guys we have and make do. It'll be, good for San Diego if they can pull it off, because it'll be nice to see somebody different in there. I like the idea of not seeing the same teams all the time. So it's cool to see a different team pop in every now and then, like a San Diego, that will will take their shot.
So I got to throw this in here, and it's something you kind of gave me a hard time about earlier today. Cohen is clearly trying to make the Mets the team in New York. Let's call it what it is.
Okay, so
Here we go.
To give David some background,
I've said it a lot on Twitter.
I got rid of Twitter like 6 months ago, and it's been a glorious 6 months. My co-host on the A Show started a Twitter for the show at the A Show on CKCC. Give us a follow. And I had to open up scrolling through it today. It seemed like every third tweet was a response from Jason running your show's Twitter saying literally that sentence verbatim to
copy paste.
Yeah, it looked like copy and paste.
It wasn't actually.
Well, then you were wasting your time. You literally wrote the same thing 46 times to 46 different people. But you were like that guy on the street corner in New York who's handing out business cards or coupons for the strip club. Like, come on out. Here's your flyer. Here's your coupon. Except yours is saying Cohen wants to make the Mets the team in New York. And you were telling literally anyone who would or would not listen.
I might have said it like 3 times.
I never exaggerate.
In an hour? What, 3 times in an hour?
That might have been the extent of me being on Twitter today. Actually, it was about an hour.
Well, I mean, you could spend a lot less time if you just copied and pasted instead of typing the same thing over and over again.
Now, with your comment... Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say the Yankees will always be the team in New York, no matter what, due to their history and their longevity. It would be cool if the Mets won a World Series, despite the Yankees also being there. It has happened twice in the past. But I don't think you'll ever see the Mets be anything more than the smackdown to the Yankees being Raw, if you will.
Well, I'm looking at it more like I think he wants it to be the premier destination for players.
I'd be cool with that, as long as they don't wind up like Cespedes falling off horses and walking into ditches and stuff like that.
As long as you guys don't sign any really bad contracts for a while. And I'm not talking like Bobby Bonilla bad. I mean comparatively to the Yankees and a Stanton contract.
Yeah, and that's fair. That said, I was there at Citi Field the day the Mets traded for Cespedes. He wasn't there yet. I was on the train to the game when they traded for him. And the hope that was in that stadium, and of course Flores hitting the walk-off that night against the Nationals in the 12th inning, it felt like a big deal. And then he fell off of enough horses and walked into enough ditches on his ranch to where we knew that, things were just not working out. And I did not mean to cut you off, David. Please continue.
No, that's fine. No, I was just agreeing with you. It is nice to see somebody different, somebody new in the World Series, because you're so tired of watching Boston and New York and all of them constantly, work through. It's always nice to see somebody you haven't seen in who knows how long. Like, let's say the Mariners. Now, who knows when they'll get back? But
I'm sorry, Brad.
Well, they haven't had a World Series since 2003, so hey, gotta love that. I mean, Phillies haven't had one since 2008, but
well, they were last in 2009. Less said about that, the better.
The win. I should say a World Series title, not going back to the finals, but a title.
So okay, if you want to talk that way, the Mets haven't had it since 1986. I mean, they were in 2015 and they were in 2000, but they have not won since 1986. So I understand, Brad, whoever you may be. I understand your pain.
So Brad is one of the co-hosts of the Baseball Together podcast that we've referenced on here a few times, and I've been on their show, and he's a big Mariners fan. Maybe bigger Mariners fan than I, Phillies fan, and you, Mets fan.
Okay. I respect that.
And he's just dying for them to do something.
I imagine most
think
of Seattle is as well.
I think anybody's dying for them to do something.
Now, I want to say, since we have you on here, Matt, I thought it was interesting that the Mets didn't play the long game and try to wait for Real Muto. I think them not waiting was a good move because I think JT is going to drag it out as long as possible.
It certainly appears that way, and they've had Wilson Ramos for the past couple of years, and he certainly was not the answer by any stretch of the imagination.
He wasn't when the Phils had him, too.
And they had Travis, I'm hurt today, but I'll be better tomorrow, and then hurt for 6 more months, Darno. And he was not the answer. So it's good to have some stability, hopefully. But no, he is going to drag it out a while. He knows he's good, and he knows in this. Here's the thing, though. Like we were talking about, in this market, is it really the best move for him to wait so long when there's not money to pay players? I mean, there's money from TV revenue, but there's not ticket revenue. There's a lot of sources of income that are missing right now. Is it really smart to play the long game and wait while no one has the extra money?
I like JT a lot. He obviously is a great catcher. I don't think he's seeing $200 million. I think that's completely unrealistic right now, and that's not a criticism on his playing ability. It's the fact of the finances right now.
And anyone who wants $200 million right now for baseball is out of their minds.
Then that's all of MLB.
Well, touche.
I mean, you got players that, sometimes are worth it, but a lot of times are not. So, on that note, that's the end of period 2. Now on to period 3. Everybody's most favorite part of the show here. Great athletes that became pro wrestlers.
So I suggested this topic because we have Matt on, and Matt is, as we stated earlier, pro wrestling referee extraordinaire. And you forgot a promotion that I actually remembered you were in. You did do work for Impact.
You're right.
You were on a pay-per-view.
The poster is literally right in front of me in my office. Right here. You can't see because this is an audio podcast, but I have posters from shows that I've worked on my wall in the office because I've been working from home for almost a year. I may as well decorate it. And that poster, which was the last one at the door at the end of the night, I was like, hey, I'm taking this. And they're like, yeah, sure, whatever.
That is the most pro wrestling thing ever.
Yeah, sure, whatever is a very pro wrestling statement. Not just for Orange Cassidy, but like for everybody.
Okay, so we're gonna deviate here. How freaking crazy is it that a guy we both were around, I as a fan, and later the show I did manage for that you ran, he was on it. You know him from the Indies. How crazy is it? He's now like one of the biggest stars on AEW. It's
insane to think that a guy that I've known for nearly 20 years is on TV feuding with Rusev and feuded with Chris Jericho for 4 months. Like there was a lot of discussion. It was a really, really big deal when that first Jericho match happened on Dynamite. It was appointment TV. It really was. Because he's a sentimental favorite. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and he deserves every bit of the success he's having. It's just bonkers to me, just absolutely bonkers that he's in this position, though we've all known how good he is for forever. Just that
him and Lucky were awesome to watch. I mean, as a fan, they were fun to watch. And he got better, obviously, over the years.
Yeah, and like he plays that gimmick where he doesn't care, but once he finally gets to do something, it's the first time, because I feel like hopefully there's not law of diminishing returns on this, but when you see him finally start to go, like it's crazy to see because the guy can go. And I've been in the ring with him so many times as he's worked so many different people under a variety of characters that for kayfabe reasons I'm not going to allude to.
Well, that's why I just said him and Lucky.
I mean, it's on the internet. If you want to look it up, you can, but I'm not going to stooge him out. I would not do that. Just the things I've seen from him are incredible. What do you say we give David the first shot here?
All right. David, why don't you go first with your pick?
All right, give somebody who's not a huge risk, but
that's the point.
Well, my first pick is Mark Henry.
That's a good one.
Which, being that everybody knows of him in pro wrestling for what he's done. Nobody knows his background in his other academics, like his weightlifting background. Like he competed in all those competitions. He still holds records. And for him to make that transition, and to be successful at both sports is a big thing, for somebody of his size. Because he's not a small guy. I
mean, yeah, he was an Olympic weightlifter. That was the whole reason he got signed, was because he was an Olympian. I
mean, his squats were was it 953.5 pounds. He deadlifted 903.9.
That's crazy.
And it's just insane. And probably going to wrestling was not a big deal for being able to lift the bigger people into what needs to be done.
Well, I mean, without getting too deep into it, there's a way that happens, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, but still, but still, I mean, you don't want me, somebody who is, just over 200 pounds, trying to lift somebody who's twice my size.
No, you don't. You're right, because that's still very difficult to do, even with how things work in wrestling. And I will say, Mark Henry's a great choice because of his persistence and how long it took him to really find himself in professional wrestling. Because for a long time, he was the shits. And I say that with the utmost respect. But, like...
Sent down to Ohio Valley with $1 million contract, bad.
I mean, I think part of it was, from stories I've heard, they were trying to get him to quit so they didn't have to pay him. But he stuck with it, and he took every dumb gimmick that they gave him, and he ran with it. And eventually he found his way with his last run where he held the world title, doing the Hall of Pain and just being the best shit talker in the world. Like, he dedicated himself to getting there.
And a reason I kind of like the Mark Henry pick more as a wrestling person, because as you said, Matt, he didn't give up. And because of that, he was honored by the Cauliflower Alley Club, which that's a big deal for pro wrestlers. That's almost a pro wrestling fraternity kind of thing. So to have his peers and the people before him recognize him for what he's done as a wrestler, that's a big deal.
It is. And, oh, excuse me. I forget what I was going to say.
It happens. No worries.
He is legitimately one of the nicest guys. Everything I've heard about Mark Henry is that he's a legit good person. So that also helps as well.
That does go a long way. Why don't you go next, Matt?
Okay. Well, obviously, if we're talking athletes turned wrestlers, we have to start with Abe Knuckleball Schwartz.
Not Chip Minton.
So Abe Knuckleball Schwartz was just a guy who, during the strike of 94, had his short season A-ball career destroyed, even though short season A-ball was not affected by the strike. And the only thing he could do was make his way to professional wrestling. He certainly was not the Brooklyn Brawler. Don't let anyone fool you. Abe Knuckleball Schwartz was very much an actual athlete.
Oh, my God.
So all that aside, if we're going to go baseball, we're going to talk about Giant Baba out of Japan, who spent his early days playing in the Japanese baseball leagues, and then after a freak injury where he cut his arm, actually retired from baseball and became a professional wrestler and became like the face of Japanese wrestling.
I thought this was a cool pick because I'm a wrestling historical nerd. And plus, I was telling David about Baba to some degree. How would you want to face an almost 7-foot tall pitcher?
That'd definitely be something that, you walk up to the plate and be like,
I did not think to look him up on Baseball Reference. I'm sure there's something there for him. But he was a heck of a pitcher for when he did pitch.
Yeah, he was pitcher of the year 3 times. And obviously that success did help to build his popularity in wrestling. But I don't think I think without Giant Baba, we don't have Japanese wrestling today as we have it.
No, we don't want to get too much into this, but I mean, if it wasn't for him and Inoki splintering from the JWA, you don't have the Japanese system that you have now. You don't have guys like Stan Hansen having tremendous careers over there, and one of my picks having tremendous careers over there.
Yeah, and that's a great transition into your pick.
So I'm going with a very personal favorite of mine, and thanks for that great transition. I went with Dr. Death Steve Williams. So I have a variety of reasons why I went with him. 4-time All-American collegiate wrestler for the Oklahoma Sooners. He played guard for Oklahoma in football, was on their 80 Orange Bowl team, their 81 Sun Bowl team, their 1983 Fiesta Bowl team. He would finish his football commitments and immediately begin participating in wrestling matches. No prior wrestling workouts. He did also play for the USFL New Jersey Generals, and he did all that while still working professionally as a wrestler for Bill Watts, which I'm sure Watts loved.
And hated at the same time, but mostly loved.
Oh, yeah, because Watts was all about tough football players.
Steve Williams was a good worker, a good hand. Obviously, his greatest success, I would say, was teaming with Terry Gordy in Japan and then back in the States in WCW like 92. And I don't know. Well, I feel like you have a counterpoint to that.
I would argue that as a professional wrestler in America, his probably greatest run was in the UWF. It wasn't a long run because the UWF was eventually bought by Crockett within his title run, but that him chasing Gordy and then him chasing Big Bubba, I mean, that was great stuff in Watts.
It was. I feel like a lot of that, especially with the newer wrestling fan, you're not going to hear much about, but at the same time, with the popularity of Japanese wrestling, thanks to people like the Bullet Club and your Okadas and people like that, people may more readily see the Doc and Gordy stuff instead of the UWF stuff. So I feel like that will be a greater legacy for him.
And I agree with that. I agree.
Or getting knocked out by Bart Gunn in the Brawl for All.
I'm not going to say the person's name because he's highly controversial, but they lost at least a good $5 million because of that.
I don't know. Bart Gunn got to work Butterbean at WrestleMania, so I think it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, but I think there was going to be a Doc Austin feud that would have been on fire.
But who doesn't get pushed then to push Doc? How does wrestling change then?
We can't go down this road. We'll be here all night.
We will. And David has a second pick, so we can't keep going. So David, as I'm hijacking your show, and I apologize.
Oh, hey, it happens. My second pick is Brock Lesnar. I know some people may love him, some people may hate him, but he is one of those athletes who did wrestling in college, then did pro wrestling, then went to the NFL, played for the Minnesota Vikings, and then MMA. So when you can, to me, if you can do that variety of sports, it's kind of makes you, somebody who, for a structure to be able to do so and get away with it. Because some people can do one sport and do another sport, others can't. Look at Michael Jordan. Couldn't play baseball.
He would have been up with the White Sox, I think. But I'm not a big Lesnar person. I think, not going off on a tangent, I think all the crap that Hulk Hogan has gotten from smart fans over the years, Lesnar is almost just as guilty of. But you give someone creative control in their contract, they're going to use it. Brock Lesnar is a freak of nature. Let's just call it what it is. He's a freak of nature athletically. Odd tattoo position notwithstanding.
Yeah, that's why.
Other than football not working out for him, he did extremely well in mixed martial arts.
Yes,
He's
he did.
had a good wrestling career, and he was a hell of a heavyweight collegiate wrestler in the NCAA. He was an NCAA All-American twice, and he was the heavyweight champion in 99 or 2000.
I think it was 99.
So, I mean, the dude was a hoss and a heck of an athlete. So, yeah, he was a great athlete to become a pro wrestler.
Gold medal in 2000, silver in 99.
Okay.
Is what it was. But, yeah, I mean, to go from wrestling to, hey, I'm going to go play football. And then go into, I'm going to try mixed martial arts now.
What are your thoughts, Matt?
I don't think that there's a better pick for this conversation based on current professional wrestling. That said, on the wrestling side, it's hard to get into his stuff because it's very repetitive. Every match is how many suplexes is Brock Lesnar going to do in this match? Is it going to be 12? Is it going to be 23? Well, I guess we'll count and find out. It is cool to see him when he does have his matches with the bigger indie guys, like when he worked Samoa Joe at the awesomely named Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view. I thought that was a really big deal to see Samoa Joe in that position to wrestle Brock Lesnar. To see people like Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles have their chances who work a more indie style. I think that's really cool.
So I just want to chime in here. I think, and this is me speaking personally as a fan, I think Samoa Joe should have been the guy to beat him because it fits Joe's character. It fits everything about Samoa Joe to be the guy to beat Brock Lesnar.
It does, and I could write a college dissertation on how many times they dropped the ball on Samoa Joe.
Oh, so many times, and it's why I don't watch. Honestly, their creative is why I don't watch.
He should have been the guy to beat AJ Styles for the belt. Instead, he looked like a geek for so long, and I'm not going to go off on that tangent, but what killed the Joe and Lesnar match was that they did the 45-minute Roman Reigns Braun Strowman ambulance segment prior to the match, and I just sat there like, all right, I want to see this match. Can we move it along? And that was like 7 minutes. And I feel like those two could have worked a lot better. But to David's point, Brock Lesnar is the guy for a modern fan to discuss in this conversation.
So, what is your pick? Your second pick?
Oh, back in 1993, there was a man named Thurman Sparky Plug.
Oh, Jesus.
And this man was a two-sport star, not just a wrestler, but an esteemed NASCAR driver at the same time. I am loving popping Jason on this. So my second pick is going to be currently on the SmackDown roster, Chad Gable. Very proficient amateur wrestler, an Olympian. Though he did not make it far in the Olympic tournament, he is still an Olympian. And to watch the things that this man can do in the ring for someone that is not very big, but has so much power and can just, the way he throws guys around, deadlifts them, it's incredible.
Yeah, he's a heck of an amateur wrestler. What did I see here? A Minnesota State wrestling champion 2004, fourth place in 2003, silver medal for the World University Games, Pan American gold medal, Olympian. He's the man. He was a great amateur and collegiate wrestler. And the way he transitioned into pro wrestling was tremendous. I mean, he picked it up quickly.
He really did. And if you go back and watch those NXT shows really from the heyday of NXT, when it was like super indie NXT, the matches that American Alpha had with now FTR,
those were great matches.
They really were. Granted, you could say the Revival was in there and they could have 5-star matches with a broomstick, as has been said about other wrestlers. But American Alpha, they held up their end as well. And a big part of that was Chad Gable and the things that he can do in the ring.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. That person with the broomstick, you're talking about Nature Boy Paul Lee, correct?
I am, definitely. Nature Boy Buddy Landell, actually. Let's get it right.
Oh, Budrow.
So who's your second pick, Jason?
I went with Brian Pillman. Kind of similar, actually, to Chad Gable in some degrees because he was a smaller wrestler. He picked it up quickly. But my biggest reason for picking him was he just didn't give up. He was a 2-time All-American from Miami of Ohio. He was a walk-on signee for the Bengals. He walked on and played for the NFL team in actual NFL games, not on the practice squad. He set a record for Miami of Ohio for tackles for loss. He also played with the Bills and the Calgary Stampeders, which inevitably led to him becoming a professional wrestler. As far as his wrestling credentials went, I mean, I think he's the prototype for cruiserweight wrestling as we know it now. Him and Liger set that. I don't think you have modern cruiserweight wrestling without Pillman and Liger in 92 and 93.
Counterpoint. I don't think you have modern cruiserweight wrestling without Jerry Lynn and the Lightning Kid.
I agree with that because I'm a global wrestling fan, but I think more people were watching WCW at that time than they were watching Global.
I will say this for Pillman. He was a good wrestler, but he wasn't always crisp, if you will.
He was sloppy.
Yeah, he was sloppy as hell. But I think that also kind of highlighted that cruiserweight style and how not everything is going to look pretty. Because I think that there's way too much in professional wrestling these days that has to look pretty. And like aesthetically, the move has to be like pleasing to the eye and it has to be perfect at all times. I think it's okay that as long as it's safe, it doesn't have to look picture perfect every time. And Brian Pillman was always safe for the most part.
Except when Sid powerbombed him.
Oh, that wasn't him. That was Sid. But like it didn't look perfect. His crossbody was not always really nice. His dives were always kind of but they were new and innovative for the time, and working with Liger actually helped him a lot to clear out some of that sloppiness. And then I would say he was even better in the Hollywood Blondes than he was as babyface Brian Pillman.
No, I agree. He came into his own as a heel, but I think athletically he was perfect to do that original cruiserweight style.
Definitely.
David, what is your third pick?
Third pick is Bill Goldberg. I know
That's a
one of
good pick.
those. I know one of those love him or hate him. Picked him due to his. He was an NFL player. He was drafted in 1990 by the Rams. Played for the San Diego Gold Miners of the CFL. Played for the Falcons. And went into wrestling then. And I mean, just go from that extent of football. He played I think it was 5 years in the NFL, and then jumped to pro wrestling. So I mean, one of those types of players where he's built for it.
He burst onto the scene huge when he did burst onto the scene. I mean, there were some early-ish matches with Mongo that were rough on the eyes.
Probably were not safe. Unlike the Brian Pillman sloppy, Mongo was a liability in every match that he was in sloppy. And notice no one picked Mongo for this. Nobody.
It was great athletes, not quasi. Mongo was a good football player. He was a hell of a football player for the Bears. He was not a good wrestler, and he was not a really good main event wrestler by any means. That's what happens when you're like 45 with a bad ponytail and you play and you're a wrestler. No, Goldberg was a good football player. He was a defensive tackle. He played his position well. His career ended because he tore his lower abdomen off of his pelvis, and that's what killed his career.
That's ridiculous to actually have that done.
Yeah, that's an injury and a half, I'd say. I think had that not happened, he never would become a pro wrestler. He never would have met Sarge and trained at the power plant. But he was definitely someone that people can look back on that 90s era, and people who may not watch now, they still know who Goldberg is. And his every 5-year returns to WWE.
So
I'm being objective. I mean, I want that to be known.
So I remember when Goldberg won the title, they had the big match in the Georgia Dome on Nitro to beat Hogan in like 5.5 minutes and held the title for like a year and a half, which was actually only like 6 months before he took the taser, right? Because he won it in July and he lost it in December at Starrcade.
Yes,
so he was only champion for 6 months.
They built that ridiculous streak and killed it with a taser.
Yes. But I remember people set off fireworks in my neighborhood when Goldberg won the world title.
Stop.
Legit. This is a shoot. Like, that happened. Goldberg was never the guy to me. He is a very different presentation from the rest of the roster, which helped him stand out. But he was not my cup of tea as a wrestler. He still is not my cup of tea as a wrestler. It's absurd that he is wrestling again at Royal Rumble this year. It's part of the reason I will not be watching Royal Rumble, besides that we canceled the network 9 months ago and have no intention of getting it back. But that said, imagine a world where Goldberg doesn't tear his abdomen off of his pelvis and continues to play football.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Controversial statement. I think if he stays in football, he probably still has a pretty long career as a football player.
I don't think so. He's very athletic, and
the shape he's in now, I think, would almost. Not saying he would still be playing football now, but the fact that he can maintain such a shape at the age he's at speaks highly of the athlete he is.
Yeah, the Atlanta Falcons bring him out every 5 years to play defensive tackle.
Strictly playoff games.
He's 54 right now. How many guys would look like him at the age of 54?
One, Bill Goldberg. That's it.
So for him
certainly
to keep
not Chris Jericho.
So for him to keep that, that type of physique, that type of structure to him, it's kind of one of those where some athletes keep that physique even after they're done. A lot of players lose it. So, if he's able to keep it even after all this, I mean, that says a lot that he's committed to even trying, just staying in shape for anything.
I mean, he doesn't have the strength behind him anymore. Well, he has the physique. A lot of it is just cosmetic, I think, at this point. If you go back, and there's a match about a year ago, which I have not seen anything but like gifts here and there because it was one of the Saudi Arabia shows, and I refuse to watch those.
Agreed.
But Goldberg wrestles The Undertaker and concusses himself very early because he just doesn't have that physical strength anymore to perform the moves like he should.
I think we need to acknowledge that those two guys should not have had a match at the ages they are.
No. But that's a different podcast for a different time.
Yes, I agree with
Welcome
you.
to Retirement Home Wrestling.
What is your final pick, Matt?
Well, I mean, David brought MMA into the fold here, so we have to talk about CM Punk being one of the greatest athletes of all time.
Oh, Jesus.
Geez, struck a nerve.
I was going to go with the Goon for this pick to appeal to David's hockey side here, because who doesn't love a good professional wrestler with boots that look like ice skates? But clearly,
I think those were ridiculous.
we'll have to send you a picture of the Goon later. It's
I've
terrible
seen
as
them.
it sounds.
I've seen them.
That was in David's time of watching.
Okay, so my legitimate third pick.
I remember who he is, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, so do I.
Oh, poor Scott Irwin.
My actual third pick, sticking with the football theme, is Ron Simmons.
Damn.
Ron Simmons. Okay, you had to do that.
You had to.
So Ron Simmons was an All-American out of Florida State. I don't understand how he went so. Going back to the draft guys who were drafted really low that were very good players. I don't know how Ron Simmons was drafted so low in the NFL draft. I think he was like 160.
He was in the sixth round.
And for someone with the credentials that he had, when I actually looked that up to research for this show, that surprised me that he was drafted that low. Now, Ron Simmons took a long time to catch on to pro wrestling. There was a podcast that my co-host from the A Show, Chris Decker, and I used to do called Shows from a Hat, where we'd watch just random shows on the network and review them. And one of them was like an episode of World Championship Wrestling from 1987. And Ron Simmons has one of the worst squash matches I've ever seen in my life, because Ron Simmons was that bad at wrestling in 1987. But he really came into his own and became the first African-American world champion, and went on to have a very successful career after a very successful collegiate football career with some NFL and CFL sprinkled in there as well.
So real quick, I want to just throw out there for those listening who may not be wrestling fans, a squash match is basically where one guy is dominant pretty much the entire match. That's the
Yes.
basic of a squash match. So Ron Simmons, to me, is one of those guys who I think is the epitome of this topic. Collegiate Football Hall of Famer. His jersey number was retired at FSU. His college jersey number was retired. That's a big deal. And it was only the third time a number was retired at that school. So think of the company he was in to have that done. He was on their Orange Bowl teams. He was in the Associated Press top 10 3 times. Like you said, multi-time All-American. He was it for FSU in football.
And I don't understand how he got drafted so well. I'm sorry, David.
Well, I was just saying he was drafted by the Cleveland Browns. Basically, he was things that he was drafted so low, but he was also practice squad for the Browns. He went to the CFL for the Ottawa Rough Riders, and then he went to the Tampa Bay Bandits for 2 years.
Oh, Bandit Ball. He played for Art Reynolds' team.
USFL. So, I mean, it wasn't like he had an extensive football career for him to be drafted the way he was, from what I'm reading here.
And that does make sense, but it still surprises me with how successful he was in college football, that he was still passed on. And maybe all those teams are correct back then. It sounds that way, that maybe he wasn't going to pan out in the NFL, because not everyone in college pans out in the NFL the way they did in college. We see that every year.
Oh, absolutely.
We see that every year. So,
you have a guy who is, he could go top pick in the NFL, NHL, NBA, and fold. How many times have we seen that happen? And then the ones that go, like we did the segment the other week, where the late draft picks turned out to be Hall of Famers, or even the walk-ons turn out to be Hall of Famers. So, but for him to find, okay, football wasn't making, then make his wrestling career for what he did.
He had a hell of a wrestling career.
So,
and another one that I worked a show with him last year in Binghamton, New York, and he is such a pleasant human being.
That's even better, honestly.
Like, you hear, and I feel like wrestlers, and going off a little side tangent here, with the passing of Brody Lee a couple weeks ago, and with what a legitimately good human being Brody Lee was, I feel like wrestlers like that need to be spotlighted more for being good people. And Ron Simmons, my time with him that day in Binghamton, he was just a regular dude hanging out in the mall, getting Orange Julius and playing on his phone. And then was also Ron Simmons, 25-year veteran of wrestling, watching all of us work and giving us pointers.
That's really cool.
So he's a real guy. Like, he is big thumbs up to Ron Simmons.
That's awesome.
So, Jason, who's your third?
Okay, so my final pick, to me, is the pick for this topic. I'm not going to say his name right away. He's a former PA State wrestling champion, two-time NCAA Division I champion, 3-time All-American wrestler, gold medal winner at the FILA Wrestling World Championships, and he won the gold medal at the 1996 Olympics with a broken freaking neck. We're talking about Kurt Angle. The man who's now starting to look like Bruno Sammartino. But neither here nor there.
Both from Pittsburgh, too.
Ironically. Angle was he a great collegiate wrestler, how fast he picked up professional wrestling speaks to how great of an athlete he is. The fact that 4 years into his career, he's in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, based strictly just on how good of a wrestler and personality he was. I think Angle is the perfect person for this discussion.
Yeah, he's definitely good for this discussion, absolutely, for what he has done to, how many people can say, hey, I want a gold medal?
With a broken freaking neck. I want that noted.
So, anybody who can do that and then, like you said, transition to this is definitely a good athlete to have for this.
To speak to the collegiate part of it, my wife went to Clarion University, where Kurt Angle went. And I remember one year I went out to help her with Special Olympics. Her sorority was very involved in Special Olympics.
That's awesome.
My job was to drive the U-Haul truck over to Sheetz and pick up all the subs. Having never driven a U-Haul truck before. That was an interesting experience, to say the least. But you walk into the gym at Clarion University, and his singlet is still hanging up there.
Oh, wow.
And, he is the guy still to this day for Clarion University for wrestling. When you look back at the history of wrestling in that building, he is the guy for obvious reasons.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I don't know if there's really a whole lot to expound on this one. I think his credentials alone are why it's such a good pick.
Yeah, you had a pretty good introduction for him.
I had to build it up.
He definitely did, a lot just before his actual wrestling career. So
these were great picks.
Yes, yeah, they were. So on that note, that is the end of period 3.
Well, before we go here, Matt, why don't you remind everyone where they can find your show and what the names of your shows are?
Thank you, Jason, and thank you both for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I hope I didn't dominate too much of the conversation. I've really enjoyed being on here with you guys. Tomorrow morning, since this will come out on Sunday night, so realistically today, when you are listening to this program, you can also catch a new episode of The A Show, which is distributed by the Club Kayfabe Creative Community, CKCC Radio for short. And this week we do have the Dooge from the Wednesday Night War podcast, which is heard on the soon-to-be-named network. And we are drafting 1992 WCW. Hint, one of a spoiler, I should say, one of my greatest athletes may have also been one of my draft picks in this episode.
Nice.
Potentially my number 1 pick. You'll have to tune in to find out. And then Dooge picked Vader with the world title and ruined everything. But tune in, you'll hear it all. And then we have a poll each time on each episode where you, the listener, pick the winner who had the best card. At the A Show on CKCC is the Twitter. Check us out. I also do have By the Numbers on CKCC Radio, which I mentioned previously. If you like either of these shows or you'd like to see me ref 15 years ago in Chikara or more recently in GSW, you can go to independentwrestling.tv. We do have a promo code for each show. It is DRAFT, D-R-A-F-T, for the A Show, or Numbers for By the Numbers. Either code will get you 5 free days as a new user for independentwrestling.tv.
That's cool.
Yeah. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for having me tonight. This was a lot of fun.
No, thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
you're the first guest.
There you go. Down in history.
And you will hear Jason one day on the A Show. We are working out the specifics. Coming up, we have Chris O'Mealy, who is actually the founder of CKCC Radio, who Jason knows from when I had Facebook and had a group where we did wacky tournaments on Facebook. He knows O'Mealy from there. We do have a tag team called the Stepdads coming on in a couple weeks as well. Out in New Jersey, and we are doing an episode with our wives.
Oh boy.
Where it's going to be just open rosters, anytime, any promotion, any wrestler. My wife has already said that her show is going to be Finn Balor against Randy Orton 8 times. You can figure out why that is on your own.
I wonder.
I wonder sometimes too.
All we can do is shake our head and say yes, dear.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes, dear. Yes, dear.
Again, thank you for coming on, Matt. This has been awesome. This has been a lot of fun. Real quick, I want to give another plug out to friends of the show, Brad and Brig from the Baseball Together podcast. Join them every week for fun baseball talk. It's almost like you're sitting in the stands surrounded by people who are just talking baseball. You can find them at anchor.fm/baseball-together. Thank you for joining us for episode 11 of the Not Another Sports podcast. You can find us online at facebook.com/notothersportspod. Feel free to like, comment, or message us. That's why we have it. It's there to interact with you, the listeners. The Not Another Sports podcast is available for streaming or download at anchor.fm, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, and wherever else you steal your podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And with that, I'm Jason.
I'm David.
And we were joined by Matt tonight. We'll talk to you next time.
Have a good one.
See you guys. Thanks again.
You have been listening to the Not Another Sports podcast. Thank you for your listenership.